Hello and welcome to the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. I am eager to talk about this topic with you tonight about peace as my alarm is going off over here. um, Y'all, this topic is one that I feel like we've stumbled on over the last couple of weeks, just kind of like dipping our toe into the concept of moving away from fear and knowing our identity and how do we operate from a firm foundation. And I'm excited to just focus on this specifically tonight. And frankly, I don't actually anticipate this will be a very long show. For a couple of reasons, but one in particular is because I think that as we actually start with the lesson today, a lot of times we'll talk for a bit and then we'll head over to the lesson and not spend as much time there. But I think that having the lesson in A Course in Miracles guide us today will really provide some insight into what does peace even mean? What does it look like in our lives? And what does this kind of peace mean as it pertains to the type of peace that I think a lot of times culture can be the I guess the um, association that they might have for peace. And so I want to explore, what does culture say around this concept versus what does the capital T truth say about it? And so, in that vein, just for some context before we dive into today's lesson, we talk about our subjective experience and encounter with the world versus the objective truth. And I like to think of it as like little t truth versus capital T truth because the reality of our experience is important for us to know, to be aware of. And the objective truth, a lot of times as it pertains to kind of the reality of what is, that is incredibly important for us to recognize. And then when you're engaging with somebody else, it's important to understand their subjective experience. And now, when you think of the capital T truth, in addition to these other two aspects of kind of the subjective reality, there's no more black and white. Now it becomes very nuanced and really learning to see the world through somebody else's eyes, which is empathy, learning to see the world through your own eyes, which protects us and saves us from codependence. And empathy saves us from becoming narcissists, but then also learning to see the world through God's eyes. And so that's what we're going to be exploring a little bit tonight is how do we allow for each view to be honored, and then how does each one of those together form kind of an ability to exist in a place of peace. And so with that, I'm going to dive into today's lesson. We started reading through A Course in Miracles at the beginning of this year, and I started doing it for my sake, and it has been so meaningful. And I'm excited to read today's lesson. We are on day 200 of the year and lesson 200 by consequence. And so today's lesson, there is no peace except the peace of God. Seek you no further. You will not find peace except the peace of God. Accept this fact and save yourself the agony of yet more bitter disappointments, bleak despair, and sense of icy hopelessness and doubt. Seek you no further. There is nothing else for you to find except the peace of God, unless you seek for misery and pain. This is the final point to which each one must come at last, to lay aside all hope of finding happiness where there is none, of being saved by what can only hurt, of making peace of chaos, joy of pain, and heaven out of hell. Attempt no more to win through losing, nor to die to live. You cannot but be asking for defeat. Yet you can ask for as easily for love, for happiness, and for eternal life in peace that has no ending. Ask for this, and you can only win. To ask for what you have already must succeed. To ask what is false be true can only fail. Forgive yourself for vain imaginings, and seek no longer what you cannot find. For what could be more foolish than to seek and seek and seek again for hell, when you have but to look with open eyes to find that heaven lies before you, through a door that opens easily to welcome you? Come home. You have not found your happiness in foreign places and in alien forms that have no meaning to you, though you sought to make them meaningful. This world is not where you belong. You are a stranger here, but it is given you to find the means whereby the world no longer seems to be a prison house or jail for anyone. Freedom is given you where you beheld but chains and iron doors. But you must change your mind about the purpose of the world if you would find escape. You will be bound till all the world is seen by you as blessed and everyone made free of your mistakes and honored as he is. You made him not, no more yourself. And as you free the one, the other is accepted as he is. What does forgiveness do? In truth, it has no function and does nothing. It is unknown in heaven. It is only hell where it is needed, and where it must serve a mighty function. It is the escape of God's beloved Son from evil dreams that he imagines, yet believes are true. Yet beliefs are true, a worthy purpose. Who could hope for more while there appears to be a choice to make between success and failure, love and fear? There is no peace except the peace of God, because he has one Son who cannot make a world in opposition to God's will and to his own, which is the same as his. What could he hope to find in such a world? It cannot have reality because it was never created. It is here that he would seek for peace, or must he see that as he looks on it, the world can but deceive? Yet can he learn to look on it another way and find the peace of God? Peace is the bridge that everyone will cross to leave this world behind, but peace begins within the world perceived as different and leading from this fresh perspective to the gate of heaven and the ways beyond it. Peace is the answer to conflicting goals, to senseless journeys, frantic, vain pursuits, and meaningless endeavors. Now the way is easy, sloping gently toward the bridge where freedom lies within the peace of God. Let us not lose our way again today. We go to heaven, and the path is straight. Only if we attempt to wander can there be delay and needless wasted time on thorny byways. God alone is sure, and he will guide our footsteps. He will not desert his Son in need, nor let him stray forever from his home. The Father calls, the Son will hear. And that is all there is to what appears to be a world apart from God and where bodies have reality. Now is there silence. Seek no further. You have come to where the road is carpeted with leaves of false desires fallen from the trees of hopelessness you sought before. Now they are underfoot, and you look up and on toward heaven with the body's eyes, but serving for an instant longer now. Peace is already recognized at last, and you can feel its soft embrace surround your heart and mind with comfort and with love. Today we seek no idols. Peace cannot be found in them. The peace of God is ours today, and only this will we accept and want. Peace be to us today, for we have found a simple, happy way to leave the world of ambiguity and to replace our shifting goals and solitary dreams with single purpose and companionship. For peace is union, if it be of God. We seek no further. We are close to home and draw still nearer every time we say, there is no peace except the peace of God. And I am glad and thankful it is so. I'm reminded reading this. I'm reminded of a section actually in A Course in Miracles that I actually used and quoted in my book. And it's this concept of why do we intentionally dwell on, consider, replay in our minds over and over again the very things that hurt us the most. It's like we meditate on that which brings us pain. So the logical question is, do I want to feel pain? Because if I don't want that, then I have the power to change. So what is the purpose of the pain on which we dwell? I think that that's actually a really important question. What is the purpose of this pain? What is the purpose of this narrative? What is the purpose of dwelling on the thing that is pulling me away from peace? The thing that is not just neutral. There's no neutral thoughts. I think that's lesson 16 out of the full 200 that we've been looking at. There are no neutral thoughts. Thoughts are either life-giving or they take away, they steal. Or so the question is, why are we choosing the thoughts that we have? And the reality is, whether we like to admit it or not, we do have choice over what we think about, what we fill our mind with. And so if we are living in a place that is not peaceful, we have to recognize, okay, well, I have a choice. I can either exist in this place that is peace because it's offered to me, it's a gift, it's here, I can walk in it. I could also choose this other environment, and the environment could be one of fear, it could be one of depression, discouragement, anxiety, chaos, noise, insert blank. So we're given these two options. But if we are choosing anything other than peace, it is so important that we ask ourselves this question of, well, how is this benefiting me? Because it is giving us benefit to some extent. We talked about this the other day around identity. A lot of times it's really hard for us to move away from some of these old identities that we've actually created this narrative about who we are because of what happened to us. So if we decide to actually heal from that thing that happened to us and move away into the future and kind of move towards something better and becoming somebody better, growing, changing, evolving, fulfilling, maybe even on our very purpose, can we actually move away from that identity and choose something different? So, to this question of, well, why do we meditate? I mean, in so many ways, it is meditating and thinking about over and over again that which causes us pain. Well, maybe we were really angry at that person. Maybe we're resentful or bitter about what happened. And so to move away, to kind of almost like turn our back on it and say, I'm going to let that go. I'm actually going to pursue peace. I'm going to pursue something different. I'm going to pursue tomorrow and let the past go. Because for so long as we are holding on to the past, we are not free to walk into the fully the present, but how much more so the future. So as we think about peace, why is it so hard to pursue peace and allow for peace to be our reality? It speaks to a willingness and a letting go of the past to experience peace in the present, and even more so, looking towards the future and having a dream for the future. You know, I was actually at dinner the other night talking with my parents and a few others, and we were talking about Martin Luther King Jr., and his whole mantra was, I have a dream. Well, in order to have a dream, you actually have to be willing to let go of the past and how it was and realize, I want a transformation from that into something better. But in order to have that happen, and this is why she talks about this kind of sandwiched in between this whole conversation on peace, we need to have forgiveness. Forgiveness is actually the pathway to move from the past into the future, to allow for a dream of a better tomorrow when yesterday and maybe even today has been corrupted and it's stolen our peace. So if we want to change and have a different trajectory, am I willing to, yes, let it go, but it's not just an ignoring, putting it away from us, accepting it. It's maybe even a forgiving aspect of, I'm going to cover that and release myself from what happened, release you, because forgiveness really is so much about releasing ourselves, but also releasing somebody else. And in that release, we're no longer tethered to the past, to what happened. And so when we're considering this concept of peace, it's actually really important for us to consider, is forgiveness the pathway to peace that I have not been able to kind of move through because I am refusing to let go of what happened to me yesterday, 10 years from now, or from today, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. What are we holding on to that we're not willing to part with, whether it has to do with, well, it's become part of our identity about who we are because of the pain of the past. Maybe it's anger at somebody else and we're refusing to let go of that. So at what point is forgiveness a part of our pathway to peace? And I just want to come back to a section here that she talks about peace specifically. Peace is the bridge that everyone will cross to leave this world behind. But peace begins within the world perceived as different and leading from this fresh perspective to the gate of heaven and the way beyond. Peace is the answer to conflicting goals, to senseless journeys, frantic, vain pursuits, and meaningless endeavors. Now the way is easy, sloping gently toward the bridge where freedom lies within the peace of God. Guys, are we willing to have something different in our lives? Are we willing to have a different story? Or are we tethered to what has happened to us, and are we playing the victim card? Thinking about Martin Luther King Jr., there's a lot of reasons for him to have been angry, for him to raise his fist and fight at the injustice. And there were surely people who did that. And I'm sure that there was effective elements to that approach. But what really strikes me about him is that he was able to hold a vision and a dream for tomorrow, allowing for forgiveness to be the pathway to get there. And he was able to really recognize that's wrong. How yesterday was is wrong. But I have a dream for a future and I have a pathway to get there. So much of what peace is yes, forgiveness. It is the letting go of the past, but it's also having a practical pathway to get there. It wasn't just theory. It wasn't just this, yelling and screaming. It was, hey, here is how we are going to make transformation in our culture and society. So it was a vision. So it was a vision for the future, forgiveness of the past, and a practical pathway of how to get there and how to have that transformation go about. I just want to jump here in the chat. Luke, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Jorge Fernandez, thank you for joining. Daymonsum, Dog, good to see you. Basically, a dumpster, hello. Just scrolling up. Brian, hello, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining, y'all. I'm just so grateful for my friend Brian here. He is our faithful moderator, and just make sure that our conversations stay on topic and respectful here in the chat. And Yado says MLK Jr. was angry, though, not a saint at all. I'm so grateful that you bring that up, because being angry does not mean, there's actually this biblical concept where it says, in your anger, do not sin. And I just love that concept. Being angry is not at all, I guess I want to say that's not the point. The point isn't that we're not angry. In fact, I actually think that we're supposed to get angry at injustice. I think that that's actually right and good. I think that shows, it's like the natural inclination when we see injustice. But there's a difference between angry, raising our fist and yelling and not doing anything about it, and going about it where it's predicated in fear, versus having anger and like a righteous anger move us to take action on behalf of the weak, on behalf of those who can't fight for themselves, on behalf of the sake of truth in and of itself. And so having this concept of, okay, we're having a vision, we have forgiveness of the past. So a vision for tomorrow, forgiveness of the past, and then a pathway in the present moment of how to get there. Man, y'all, that is so powerful. We've seen movements before across the world where people have had the anger, and they're so, man, they're passionate, but they don't have the forgiveness, and then they don't have the pathway to get there. And then a whole bunch of noise. It's devastating. The unity that is necessary to power real change. And so when we talk about peace, Danger says Jesus flipped tables. It's like, yes, we're, guys, man, I want to say this, but it's not a broad, sweeping generalization. I believe so many of us are actually called to do the flipping of the tables, to actually change status quo, adjust, or slightly even alter the way not culture is operating and society around us, maybe our generational, your family of origin. Look at your grandparents and then their parents and then their parents. And look at you today. And what would you want to have changed in the generations that come after you? In this conversation, we were talking about Martin Luther King Jr. We were listening to a book on Harriet Tubman, and slavery was something that at the time many people thought was fine. It was just the way things were done, and they had data and revelation from God to back up them supporting slavery. Today, everyone can agree that that's vile, and actually, it's like, man, it's so not God's heart. you know, and then to do something like that in the name of God, among so many other things that have been done in the name of God, is just devastating. But looking back in that conversation, we were talking about what's happening today that 100 years from now, people will look back on and say, I can't believe that they thought that was fine. So, to this point of having a vision that's big enough and like all encompassing enough to welcome other people into, hey guys, this needs to change. This needs to be different. That is the flipping of the tables. That is bringing real change into the way that we operate as a society, as a community, as a country, as a world. But so many times it actually starts with you and me in our families. What do we want to adjust in our own family bloodline? And y'all, there's real stuff that gets passed down between just father son, mother daughter, and then it keeps going. And so, Nancy, just saw your note. You know, it's not about condemnation. I actually think that that's such a. I'm glad you brought that up. She says it's not about condemning modern people. I think that's the point. Is just being curious about what is on your heart, about what maybe something that could be changed in our own family. And once we start looking in the mirror for ourselves, for the way we were raised, what are narratives, what are belief systems that maybe don't have the same grounding as they did when we were young, or maybe they didn't have much grounding at all, but we just blindly believed it. So it's starting with you and me looking in the mirror for ourselves, being humble enough to look at needs to change in us beyond and before looking at everybody around us. Let's take the log out of our own eye and see what can change. And then from there, okay, let's go out and flip some tables. But sometimes it starts with changing and flipping tables in our own lives. And then by kind of like developing the habit, the practice of a vision for a different tomorrow, your vision, what is what does change really look like? Having forgiveness for the past, present moment. Says victim. Easy to get stuck in that place. You know, if we're just, I think that that's kind of the point of if it's just anger that is really passionate, but there's no practical application, there's no real change, and there's no forgiveness. I think it's a dangerous place to be because that victimhood just it's almost like the byproduct of anger without action. And so as we kind of look at this whole conversation around what is even peace, you know, why is it so hard to find? And, you know, I just am thinking about even the fact that you even said victimhood. I kind of had that in the back of my mind as we were talking up until this point. You mentioned it, conflict, because that's really so much of the stance of we see that there's a problem, we identify it, we don't like it. Maybe it actually does make us angry or passionate, but we don't have either the tools or the mechanism or the willingness, insert whatever it is, but we, for whatever reason, are not willing to pursue forgiveness for the past or work hard enough to get to a real practical action to take that's really going to bring about the change that we want. So then it circles all the way back to what we were talking about earlier in the show. How does that pain, that experience, thing which makes you angry, how does it serve you? Does it serve and reinforce a narrative you have about yourself or the world? Does it maybe even self-perpetuate your own identity? I identify with this thing that makes me so angry. I'm one of those people, and I'm an maybe not even activist. Maybe I'm just somebody in this camp. I'm just one of these people. And maybe you are an activist, but you know, I associate with this group. So actually, by way of my own anger, I don't even want to let go of it because that's where I have found my tribe. That's where I found community. It's in the place of people who are angry about a particular thing. But it goes beyond that. And frankly, I experienced this one very it hits close to home. I my I guess you could say my inability to pursue peace actually came from my inability and unwillingness to heal after my brother-in-law was killed. I did not want to heal. because I was actually kind of afraid, like, if I heal from this, then he's not going to live on in our hearts. Because if I stop grieving, he's not going to be so close anymore. And so I effectively kind of tied my identity in this sense to this grief. And then the thought of healing from it and moving away from it felt like I was actually betraying my brother-in-law. And then it becomes, well, that's who I am. I'm somebody now who is grieving, and I'm somebody who's lost a family member, and I'm somebody, now all of a sudden it's because I was unwilling to heal in the first place. Then slowly over time, my identity becomes attached to it. And then suddenly it's okay, well, because I'm so close to this emotion, because I'm so close to grief, or I'm so close to anger, I'm so close to bitterness or resentment or depression, I am, I am statements for us and kind of creates this almost safety where it's, well, I know who I am. I'm safe here. I don't know. Y'all, there's something around the going back to, the abused victim going back to the abuser. They know what to expect. It's comfortable. It's safe in that it's safe by way of the ease and comfort of I know what to expect. So the certainty of misery versus the uncertainty of a potential better tomorrow. So with this whole conversation around having a dream for tomorrow and having a bigger vision and forgetting from the past and then creating a pathway here in the present to allow for real change, it requires most immense amount of courage for you to be true. It requires a lot of courage to let go of the past and say, I'm actually going to allow for personal transformation and that's not going to be who I am anymore. Choose something and I choose to be somebody better. I choose to be somebody different. Maybe it's not better, maybe it's just different. I'm in this process right now and I think a lot of you can probably relate to this where it's just a completely different season. Like I feel like my life is really in this shifting time. And as a result, it's tempting to think, oh, this season was bad and this one is good. Or then I'm getting into, I feel I'm nervous it's going to be bad, rather than it go even and allow for it to just be what it is and not assigning real meaning to it, perhaps. So I think that's actually part of peace, to just let it be and to let go of the past, yes, but also kind of let go of what it is right here, right now, and just be curious. And so that all of that speaks to this concept of looking in the mirror and observing what do I see right now? What could be something I could change? What could be something that I could adapt or strengthen to allow for again the vision of a better tomorrow? And it could be a mission, it could be advocacy, it could be something that you're called to do. It could just be who do you want to be? Who do you want to be and how do you want the world to be and what needs to change in order to get there? Just jumping into the chat here. I love it. My Willie says there's no better, only different. Mm. Big Ray, hello. I'm glad to see you. You said you're in touch with true healthy mental health around holding on to anger. Mm. I wish you could talk to my ex-wife, 17 years divorced, who still holds the victim mentality. Oh man. It's funny. I remember when my husband left me. I felt like I was at a crossroads. Like I never have in my life felt this before. And I don't think I felt it since. But I felt like I was standing and I had two completely different paths. One of them was exactly what you're saying, Big Ray, was if I don't look in the mirror and do the very thing we've been talking about this entire show, look in the mirror and identify every single thing that I've done wrong to allow for our marriage to end and take 100% responsibility for all of it. If I don't like A, and path B is I do that. I look in the mirror and I take responsibility. So path A is I blame him. In one sense, that almost felt justifiable because he was the one that was leaving. B is okay, let me take responsibility. And I just knew if I chose path A where I blamed him, man, I just knew I would end up being so bitter and so resentful and live the rest of my life as a victim. The thing about path A, you have somebody to blame. They're really cozy and comfortable about being a victim. You forever have there's a scapegoat, always. You do not have to take responsibility for your life. You can sit there and point the finger all day and never actually really assume any hmm, yeah, assume any blame, but really it's cowardly. It's cowardly to live as a victim. It's easy and it's cowardly. So, to assume responsibility, path B, that is actually it's terrifying. What am I going to see? What won't I like about myself? What won't I like about the decisions I've made? What won't I like about the consequences of my life and what I have chosen? Between stimulus and response is choice. Every single one of us, she chose every part of this up until this point. For the most part, obviously there's stimulus. You can't choose the stimulus, but you can always choose the response. She chose every time her response. And so to take that approach, the path B is to fundamentally take the power back. But in so taking the power back, you lose all scapegoats. And so it's like, man, I really understand. I understand the temptation to live as a victim. And I think that it's really important that in terms of about this earlier, knowing our experience objectively and see the world through, okay, this is what I went through. See the world through God's perspective. Capital T truth, objective truth. We have a subjective truth, and so does that other person. But man, being able to sit in the other person's shoes and have empathy to see the world through their eyes, usually in so doing, we see, we're talking about having a big vision for the future for tomorrow and forgiveness for the past. Our past so often colors our perspective, and so does theirs. So the more we take time to understand our past, our partner's past, even our exes, more empathy we're able to hold for them. In whether they're able to meet us there or not, it at least gives us some semblance of like understanding and kindness and gentleness for their experience. Just jumping back here in the chat. Um, uh, basically a dumpster. Hello. Oh, hold on, I'm trying to catch up. um, just scrolling down. Uncle, hello. Handled. Denali, hello. Infinite Being, hello. James Steiner, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I wish I could give you a hug. LOL, cool, hello. Thank you for joining. Cesar, microphone. He's talking about my microphone. I know, I don't have any formal equipment. I love this. Fun Cool says, unpack your past if anything comes up in the present. That's so good. Mm. Handled, hello. Got good stuff, hello. Christopher Adams, hello, my friend. What life has taught me is you don't seek after peace, but peace finds you where you are. Your Greek word tapenos means lowly or grounded. If God is peace, then he meets you where you are. That's beautiful. Wow. Wendy, hello. Thank you for joining. Infinite Being, hello again. Yada. Um, oh no. I heard my microphone's acting up. Byron, hello, my friend. Good to see you. Troy, thanks for joining. Buster, hello. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. 47, 48. Hello, Jackie boy. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Jorge Fernandez, hello. He says, I would love to know your name. I'm sorry I don't have my name on here. I need to figure out how to turn it back on. My name's Christene Marie. I'll put it here in the chat. American Redneck, hello. I'm so glad to see you. It's been a little while. Sai, oh, good to see you. You said you look tired. I am so tired. I feel seen. I feel so tired, and at the same time, I'm excited. I'm going to do the show tomorrow morning, in the morning, and I'm excited to do that, because I have been getting on late in the last couple of days. Sender B, oh, my people are here. This is so fun to see you guys. Oh, yay! I'm so glad to see you. RK, hello. I'm glad to see you. Um, Brian, thank you. I just saw you put that in there. I so appreciate you. Appearing phenomena. Hello. You asked, oh my gosh. I would love to hear other people's answers on this. He says, what is masculine? What makes a boy a man? Part of me just wants to have a guest on here and we'll talk about this. But let's go ahead and talk about this for a moment here in the chat. I'd love to hear people's response to this question. What's man? What is a man? And frankly, let's tie it into the topic. What does it look like in a masculine fashion to engage with peace? And I'd love to hear specifically for men, how have you entered into peace? And it's interesting. I think that the peace sounds very gentle and sometimes a bit ethereal. So what does it look like to actually, I love that Steve Adams, you said it actually means grounded. And so I'd love to hear y'all's experience with that. It basically, Adams here says, I'm not sure we are here to experience peace. I love this. This is such a good conversation. I'm here to experience peace. I think we are meant to experience turmoil to test us, to see what we choose to do with our free will. Peace is found in the afterlife. What an interesting point of view. Honestly, I really love that. Like I love the aspect of engaging viscerally with the world and growing and changing as a result of that. So I really like that perspective, and I'd be curious to hear other people's perspective. A boy becomes a man when he starts to get interested in girls, Jerry says. That's it. Honestly, I've heard a lot of people say that too. Like when you're kind of coming of age almost. That's like a really, really good sign. Peace and calm in a storm, Adam says. Bull. I think you're good. You picked up on it for sure. I definitely am intense. Mark Preston, good to see you. Daniel Williams, thanks for joining. I think it's an interesting question, and it's one actually really worth sitting with, and maybe we'll even talk about this a little bit tomorrow. But I actually think that this is really important, y'all, because when we're talking about, I used Martin Luther King Jr. as an example earlier, and when you look at men and women who have pursued peace, yet have done so by way of going into battle or defending their country, or maybe even basically through a militant pursuit, but then also through peaceful endeavors, like actually through solidarity or engaging in that regard. It's what does it look like to, almost like, depending on personality, depending on gender, depending on race, religion, what does peace look like? But I want to focus on it from this masculine perspective, because I think that that's really, really good. It's a really good question. Unfortunately, I think every man has their own definition of what is a real man. There is no wrong answer, just maybe wrong ways of treating others. Hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point. Um, a boy becomes a man when that man has value to others. Logic and reason. I love that. Hmm. There is peace. Their peace is God, and having the heart for him and mankind is your heart in your heart. Mm. Hmm. Peace. Oh, I just saw that it was retracted. Um, I kind of want to save this topic and actually go deeper into it another day because I think when I'd love to actually have a male counterpart to have this conversation with. I will say, from my experience, from the female perspective, of what when I've basically witnessed a man graduate or a boy graduate into a man, it was when the man had a mission, when the man had something for which he was fighting, pursuing, driven towards. It's kind of like what you said, he has value to offer. It's a vision bigger than himself. He's able to see and dream, and it's kind of like he has that vision for tomorrow, and he takes action. So it's honestly, wow, that's funny. It's kind of almost exactly like what we're talking about tonight. It's he has a vision, he has a mission, he's driven and compelled to something, and then takes action as a result. I think a boy might have a vision or a dream. I think dream is actually very childlike and very important, not action. Boy growing to a man, it's actually taking real and taking autonomy and control of their life, radical responsibility to execute upon their dreams. I'm just jumping here in the chat. Irene, good to see you. Thanks for joining. IAMDT, hello. Oh, you're getting married soon, Irene. I love that. Congratulations. Um, just jumping here in the chat. Hi, Goose Hunter. I'm so glad you're here. Good to see you. William, thank you. Thank you for joining. Um, y'all, I loved this conversation tonight, and I'm so grateful for just the reminder around peace. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we talked about, the subjective, our personal experience, the subjective, someone else's experience, and then the capital T truth, the objective reality of what is, and that's ultimately God's perspective. And so the question is, are we willing to ultimately view the situation in front of us through God's perspective and in the perspective of the creator, then we will get that vision for tomorrow to have real change and kind of like to usher in peace for our families, for ourselves, for our communities, and really bring about real change. And in that change comes, man, there's unity on the other side of it. Peace really does usher in a new era for us to engage together. Y'all have a wonderful night. I will see you tomorrow morning. Let me check my calendar. I think I can go live at 9 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, 6 a.m. Pacific. I'll kind of hopefully slowly get back on schedule. Let's do it. 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. I will see you tomorrow morning. Have a good night.